Unconscious?
Yeah, he was.
So we get a hold of somebody who heard the gunshot?
A father, gunned down and left to die alone.
I really wish he was here.
When Zeth talks, you'll hear Roy. And sometimes I just lose it.
An ailing son stands up for his mother.
How am I supposed to do this? I have a little boy that's dying of cancer.
I get it. She's not a lonely victim in this.
Two families torn apart in a single moment.
Love you, Mom.
I just don't think this is fair. If they give a shorter sentence, that's saying my son's life never mattered.
For those most affected by a homicide, the first 48 is just the beginning. This is the story of the fight for justice in the weeks, months,
It's been 3 years. It still seems like yesterday.
We miss him and wish that he was with us.
No matter what kind of life you're living, nobody deserves to get murdered at 37 years old, man.
When I got to the room and I said, Roy, and that was his last breath. It was just all over. Your heart just leaves. It's not all whole. And it never is again. It never is. I didn't think they was gonna take my son's life. Putting somebody's parents through that. I'm not gonna play victim to them anymore.
Do you need police, fire, or medical?
Probably medical. There is a bicyclist that has been hit by a car. He's laying in the middle of the road. He is not looking good.
With the man in critical condition, first responders rush him to the hospital.
That we have what first responders thought was a hit and run, but never realized that the individual had suffered a gunshot wound. I was sitting at home and enjoying my evening until I got the call. I was up in rotation for the next homicide. I'm Detective Mark Kennedy. I've been with the Tulsa Police Homicide Unit for 16 years. He is in critical condition at the hospital. What's up, guys?
I was able to get some pictures before they held him off.
The victim was shot once in his right arm and in his back.
That's him. He's got some tattoos. He's got one on his left wrist. So Seth?
The officers walked a good distance looking for casing, but nothing found.
Wow, it's weird. Well, we really didn't know what we had. Then we found out that there were a couple witnesses that found his body. Two of them were sisters. They remember seeing what they thought was a Ford Bronco that did kind of a U-turn in the road down there about where the bicycle is located, and then went northbound. Hey, so we get a hold of somebody who heard the gunshots?
The lawnmower guy did.
We found another witness who heard gunshots, looked back, and saw a vehicle doing a U-turn, and he described the vehicle as like a camouflage Jeep Cherokee.
2 hours in,
The only thing camera-wise that pointed in this direction, shoot from this way, from some hole.
while the team works on getting surveillance video,
Right now, we need to get an ID on our victim.
back at homicide,
He's got a tattoo on his left arm.
Corporal Nathan Schilling scours the database for the victim's tattoo.
I found a case.
And finds the name Zeth in a police report.
Roy Cobb, right there.
Roy Cobb is identified in the report as Zeth's father.
Okay, and his kid's Zeth Cobb.
Yeah.
Zeth.
We were able to pull up a picture of him. We were able to positively ID that was Roy Cobb.
Roy Cobb, who is still clinging to life in the ER, is a 37-year-old Tulsa native. Roy works as a handyman and is a single father to his 12-year-old son, Zeth.
He lives in Owasso.
Detective Mark Kennedy finds the name Casey Sainsbury listed as Roy's girlfriend in an old arrest report.
Casey, this is Detective Kennedy with Tulsa Police Department. How are you? I'm trying to find somebody who knows a guy by the name of Roy Cobb. Okay, well, I'm just going to tell you, he was shot tonight.
Is he okay?
Well, he was taken to St. John's Medical Center, and he's in critical condition.
Casey says Roy left her house to go see a friend less than an hour before the shooting.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah?
His next A and B down list a Vicky. Try 835.
Hello?
Is this Vicky?
Yes?
Vicky, my name is Detective Kennedy with Tulsa Police.
Yes, sir?
Ma'am, I'm calling you about your son, Roy Cobb.
Yes, sir?
Ma'am, somebody shot him tonight.
How is he?
He was still alive, and I'm sure he's in ICU.
Who shot him? Jeremy or Hayden?
She immediately told me the names of Hayden and Jeremy Sainsbury. I was a little surprised and taken back.
The detective was probably shocked that I gave him a clue already to go on.
They always fought. They didn't get along. Honey, he always told me that if anything happens to him, that it's them.
Roy's mother says Hayden is Casey's 17-year-old son, and Jeremy is her ex-husband.
There's nothing in traces as far as them driving a Jeep Cherokee.
Okay, I will run up there, see what kind of cars are in the driveway.
There's no Jeep in Roy's girlfriend's driveway.
Hello.
But detectives decide to speak with her again.
Casey here?
I'm Tracy.
Who lives here right now?
Me, my mom, and my two sisters.
Casey's teenage son, Hayden, also comes to the door.
Where's Jeremy?
Your dad?
Yeah.
He lives out there on the river.
Okay. So whenever Roy was here, you guys had any problems? You and him?
Yeah.
My son has cancer.
I'm sorry. So.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Hayden has been suffering from leukemia since he was 16 years old.
You don't recall him having any problems with anybody?
He be yelling at people on the road. You're driving too fast. That's just how he is. I mean,
So he's confrontational?
yeah.
So he left. Did he leave upset?
Yes.
About what?
Casey says that she and Roy were arguing before he left, and Roy hit her.
What kind of cameras do you have?
Does it record?
Yeah, they were.
Schilling and Kennedy review home security video of Roy leaving the property earlier that night.
He's smacking her right here in the front yard before he leaves. She's pulling him off the bike. They're going at each other, and they didn't treat each other very well. You see Casey and Hayden on the video, but they never leave the house after Roy leaves.
Really?
It surprised me. He just pissed off the wrong damn person there on the highway.
With no evidence that Casey and Hayden left the house, detectives believe Roy could have been a victim of road rage.
Call tonight, then get back up in the morning and start looking at video along Mingo. See what we can find.
The next morning, Kennedy gets a call from the hospital.
All right, bye-bye. Just found out Roy Cobb died last night, so now this is officially a homicide.
Everything that I had strived through with that child for 37 years, hoping that he would have a good life, was all over.
14 hours in, the team has video from the camera facing the crime scene.
This is where he was shot at the American Airlines entrance. Our victim's already there. Let me go back a little bit here. Unfortunately, we didn't get the murder on tape.
Later that day,
North from the shooting scene, basically goes up into an industrial area. We're going to check businesses along that way. Hopefully we'll have some luck.
detectives canvass the route where the suspect may have fled, hoping to find more video.
Hey, Mark. I got some new video.
10-4. Nate went over to a business at Pine and Mingo, and on their video, he sees our suspect vehicle. Hello, how are you? That was good. We did have luck on our suspect vehicle. We do have it on video in there. I mean, it's hard to tell if it's just covered with mud or if it's actually camo, but it is a Jeep Cherokee. That's our suspect. You see the individual get out, and I go, that's Hayden Sansbury. Hayden had a distinctive body style. We saw him that night when we made the death notification. He had his shirt off. That's Hayden Sansbury on the video. He pulls out of the parking lot. He goes north on Mingo, right in the time period that we know that Roy Cobb is shot. And boy, did a red light go off right then. The problem is I thought I saw somebody that looked like it could have been Hayden on the home surveillance video, but now, looking at these images we got, I think we need to go back there and get our hands on that video and see if we can figure out who that was.
Kennedy and the team head to Casey's house
There was sufficient probable cause to get a search warrant for this address.
to collect the Sainsbury's home security video.
Anybody all right?
Go ahead, Max.
The one that's on that video, I think, is backing up the driveway.
Detective Max Ryden spots a Jeep Cherokee parked in Casey's driveway.
10-4. I'll be there in a second. We'll take a look. Yeah, stand by for a second. Yeah, I definitely think that's probably it. Sure enough, this day, there is a Jeep Cherokee that matches the description on the video, parked in the driveway. And we know at this point he's not being truthful.
Here we go.
Wait. You see your hands. You see your hands. Turn around.
Casey and Hayden are taken to homicide.
We served the search warrant on Casey Sansbury's house. We wanted the video from the house.
But when they check the system,
the surveillance video appears to have been wiped.
Anytime we go into a residence that evidence has been destroyed, that's an immediate red flag. Obviously, they're trying to cover something up. We start our interview process. We talk to Casey. That night, we looked at video, and obviously I seen you and Roy's altercation, and we searched your house and we found the video again. We noticed it had been deleted.
No, I haven't. I don't know how to work that thing.
Did you call him?
He called me.
Did you tell him he'd beat on you?
Yes.
I know, it's Huff. It's your son.
Man, how am I supposed to do this? Like,
Well-
my boyfriend, and that's my.
And it's your son. I understand it.
I have a little boy that's dying of cancer. I mean,
I get it.
What did he tell you about how he found Roy?
he said that God put him there, on that, both of them on that road together.
Okay. All right, Hayden. You remember Detective Brown?
Sure do.
You obviously know what this is about. It's about Roy Cobb. That night, what happened?
I guess they got in a fight and he put her in a chokehold or something. I don't know. That's really all I know. I was at the park. But when I got home, the bike nor him was there. I never left. My vehicles were there.
Hayden, he lies at first. You know, he tries to be deceitful. Here's the thing. This happened right across the street from American Airlines. What do you think they have?
Security footage.
Exactly. And businesses to the north, what do you think they have?
Security cameras.
Exactly. We always say look at body language in interviews. At some point, you could tell he's defeated. He knew that the gig was up. Tell me what happened when you two met. Tell me what's going through your mind.
Mom, that's all I got. And I was tired of it, man.
How did you know to go north on Mingo?
I didn't. It was a crazy chance of him just being there.
According to Hayden, that was just a chance meeting. I don't believe that for a minute. I think he knew exactly the route that he would be taking. So what did you do?
I first drove by him.
All right.
And then I did a U-turn and came back. I asked him what he was doing, beating on my mom, you know? And he told me to shut up and that I was next if I didn't get on out of there and all kinds of stuff. And
Tell me the truth. Tell me the whole thing.
I shot him. It was just out of instinct, man. I mean...
Do you remember how many times you fired the weapon?
5 times.
How many of those did you fire at him when he was running away?
I know I fired 3 right on him and then 2 whenever he was running.
So when he's running away, he really isn't a threat to you anymore, correct?
No. No, sir. I just didn't know what to do anymore, man.
Well, I understand that. But we can't be vigilantes. Let us handle it. You know? That's the way the law of the land is. And you're going to be booked into the Tulsa County Jail for murder tonight, okay?
With just 2 hours left in the first 48, Kennedy closes his case.
stand up for me. You want to stand right here for me? Put your hands behind your back.
Doing my hug first before you release me.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
Love you.
Love you, Mom.
I think Hayden became somewhat of his mom's protector, or he felt like he had to intervene.
Kennedy searches the database and learns Roy and Casey's domestic dispute was not an isolated incident.
Casey filed several protective orders, but they never followed through with them. Look at their relationship, both sides probably had fault.
Hayden is charged with first-degree murder and is transported to Tulsa County Jail.
My son loved these people. They were family to him. Hayden shot Roy in the back in cold blood. I wanted Hayden to be in jail till the day he dies, alone. This was Roy's hammock. We know that days we'd come home and he'd be laying in the hammock.
But that's the reason why it's still here. It's not going anywhere.
Sometimes you look out the kitchen window and you just wish you could still see him here. Let's go in here and get these pictures real quick. They're a little bit heavy. Saying Roy was perfect was far from it. He had his own demons. He was a druggie. He did meth. There's no two ways about it. But Roy never stopped loving people. See his hair there?
Yeah, I was looking at that. My dad was a complicated person. He got addicted and it was hard for him to get out of it. He put me through stuff, but I also loved him a lot and I knew he cared about me.
He loved his son very, very, very much. Roy wanted to be there. He just wanted to be the dad. Roy was trying to get back on his feet. He had just started a job remodeling with a guy and bought that bicycle himself, and he was so proud of it. You'd think he bought a new car. I mean, he was just so happy that he'd gotten that far in his life.
I'm Kevin Gray. I'm an assistant district attorney here at the Tulsa County District Attorney's Office. One of the most important questions ultimately that needed to be answered by those potential jurors: are you going to be able to send a teenager to prison for the rest of his life?
September 11th, 2019, with Judge William D. LaFortune presiding, the trial begins.
Once you get a jury in the box, it's like you've finally got to the starting line.
My name's Eric Nolan. I currently live in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
You're kind of nervous because you literally have someone's life in your hands.
Murder in the first degree in the state of Oklahoma doesn't require us to prove motive, but the only important question usually is why. There's a pretty clear why. He's angry at Roy Cobb. He's angry that Roy hit his mom again, but obviously it doesn't paint Mr. Cobb in the light that we would usually like a victim to be painted.
With Public Defender Stuart Sutherland representing Hayden, Gray presents his opening statement to the jury.
I laid out our position that Hayden was on a mission and he hunted Roy Cobb down. Once he found him, he just slaughtered him in the street. The defense laid out a little different story, where Hayden is a 17-year-old who's frightened and protective of his mom and just happened across Roy Cobb, just wanted to confront Roy, but essentially asked the jury to be lenient and to show mercy.
After Gray and Sutherland present their statements, Detective Mark Kennedy testifies about the surveillance footage from Casey's house.
The video on this one, I mean, it was mutual combat, if I could call it that. I'm old school. I don't think a man should ever lay hands on a woman. But at the same time, she's not a lonely victim in this.
What really struck a chord with a lot of us was the fact that
that video footage had been deleted. We knew that someone was trying to cover up something up.
Juries don't like liars and usually punish them for it. And the jury got to hear and watch Hayden lie. I don't think that worked well for the defense.
Gray also shows the jury the surveillance video from the gas station near the crime scene.
I thought you could see he was at the convenience store, you could see he was on the phone, and he was very upset.
With that, Gray finishes his argument.
At that point, I had rested my case. I was done with my witnesses. I had presented what I needed. Now it was the defense's turn.
Then, the defense makes a surprise move.
The judge called for the defendant's case in chief, and that's when Mr. Sutherland called Hayden Sainsbury.
The defendants typically don't take the stand. When we found out he was going to, it was shocking.
There's an adrenaline rush. It's getting ready to change the dynamic in the room. Hayden took a stand because he needed to lay out how he felt, how that phone call impacted him. That strategy is to convince the jury this was a manslaughter case, not a murder case.
The defense argues that the murder was not premeditated.
He said that he always took a gun with him because you don't know if you'll need it.
Sutherland explains to the jury that Hayden kept his handgun in his Jeep for protection.
Mr. Sutherland is a smart, very experienced defense attorney and very intelligently had Hayden acknowledge some of the lies he had told. It showed some level of remorse. The defense strategy was to make him almost a passive victim in all of this.
He said that Roy was going to attack him, and he felt scared.
Whenever he got on there and said it was self-defense, I felt very angry that it was a lie. What's good and what's bad, there shouldn't be any in between.
Then it went off the rails a little bit. And the more he talked, the more frustrated he got. And it had a level of anger in his voice. Hayden said that he got a gun so that he'd be ready the next time this happened. Instead of showing a meek and remorseful young man, it showed him as an aggressor. And I think that really hurt him.
Roy was shot in the back. You could tell he had turned and was leaving the scene. So that's hard-pressed to not find fault in that.
Both the prosecution and defense rest their cases. The jury must now decide, were Hayden's actions premeditated and malicious enough to find him guilty of murder in the first degree?
As we deliberated, there were several who did want to pursue a life sentence. There were some who wanted to go a little less, as far as 20 years or so. So we decided, let's meet somewhere in the middle.
The jury finds Hayden Sainsbury guilty of first-degree manslaughter. Judge LaFortune decides on a sentence of 24 years in prison with 10 years probation.
When the verdict was read, I was very happy. I know jails and prisons not a wonderful place, but he didn't have the right to take my son's life.
Three years after Roy's murder, Hayden and his attorney have filed a new motion in Tulsa court.
Now there's a hearing on September 10th. Are you planning to go to that?
Why is there a hearing on September the 10th? Can you tell me more, please?
I heard that Hayden is trying to get a lesser sentence, that he's going before the judge.
I don't understand why they would give him a lesser sentence. I mean, what gives them the right to put us back through this again? Are they just ignorant to people's pain? Our whole life is bittersweet memories of Roy. Hayden should never be out. Hayden every day should remember why he's where he is, in prison. And he should remember the name Roy Cobb, because that's the choice he made that put him here.
The same judge that tried Hayden, Judge William D. LaFortune, has granted him a hearing in which he can ask for a reduced sentence.
I guess I better get started with my rally to make sure this doesn't get less. Yeah, I plan on being there. I'm very upset. For some reason, it's worse than the trial.
Vicky and Dennis gather their strength to attend Hayden's judicial review hearing.
I just don't think this is fair. If they give him a shorter sentence, that's saying my son's life never mattered. We riding in this one? Okay. This is my son. I'll always be there for him. I will go and I will stand there. And I will try to let them know what I feel is justice.
The first trial, you know how many years he got, you know what the jury handed down to him. This time, there's no jury involved. It's just whatever the judge decides.
I'm trying to stay calm and...
It's just the unknown of it.
I am really nervous and upset. That was my grandson. But if I had my way, he would never go home.
Vicky, Dennis, and Roy's grandmother, Georgia V., arrive at the Tulsa County Courthouse.
I don't feel strong right now.
Can you hear me, Mr. Sainsbury?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. You may be seated. We will then go on the record. State of Oklahoma versus Hayden Lee Sainsbury. Case comes on today for a hearing on motion to suspend sentence that was filed on June 11th, 2021. Mr. Gray is here for the state, and then Ms. Nicole Heron is here for the defense, assistant public defender. So, Ms. Heron, I'm going to let you start. You want to ask him some questions and let him speak? Any objection?
No, Judge.
All right, go ahead, Ms. Heron.
Public defender Nicole Heron makes her argument for Hayden's early release by letting him speak from prison.
Okay. And how long have you been there? 2 years. Since you've been there, have you participated in any kind of programs? Yes, I have. I have gotten into the GED program. I'm one test away from getting my GED. And I noticed in your records you have a completion of a literacy course. Is that right? Yes, ma'am. Do you have a career goal in your to be released? I plan on going into welding school or going to school for carpentry. Have you had time to reflect on what you've done? Yes, I have. I wrote a letter to the judge if I'm able to read it.
Heron gets permission from the judge for Hayden to read a statement.
I would like to thank you for the chance to come back to court for a sentence reduction. It means a lot to me and my family. I'm a changed man, and I want to say that I'm deeply sorry for what happened to Mr. Cobb. I don't know what I was thinking, but nobody deserved to die that night. I made a terrible mistake that should have never happened and caused a lot of pain to the family of Mr. Cobb. And I hope they can find it in their hearts to forgive me for what I've done. I took the law into my own hands and hurt a lot of people with the actions I took, which cost me my freedom, future, and my chance to get healthy and start my own family. If you give me the chance to have a second chance at life, I have my life planned out the day I'm released from custody of the state. I want to become someone, Your Honor, and leave my past behind me. I thank you for the chance to be here today.
Thank you, Mr. Sainsbury.
I think his mother, if you would like to speak, if you would allow that.
Absolutely.
Assistant District Attorney Gray calls Vicky to read her victim impact statement.
On August 8, 2018,
My son Roy Cobb was shot in the back several times by Haley Sainsbury, a child that I carried. And the Murray is left dying on a concrete pavement with no one he knew around. Since then, my life has not been the same. I continue to bleed out of my skin and harbor a wound that will never heal. Pulling the trigger came easy. Hayden never has shown any remorse for taking a life or looking next time. As a mother of a son, I pray and rely on this court to please not change this sentence as I'm trying to carry on. For the deep legal loss that never goes away, any parent that has a child murdered knows this. Sincerely, Victor Clinton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Gray.
Jury sat in court, watched him for a week, and said, you know what? 3+ decades in prison ought to do.
Gray asks the judge to uphold the sentence he gave 2 years ago.
It is the state's perfect request. I think you can tell the family is desperate plea for you not to continue.
Heron makes a case for Hayden's good behavior in prison and asks the judge to consider Hayden's ongoing battle with cancer.
We're not saying that what Hayden did was right. It was wrong. And we didn't know that. I think that Hayden deserves to get out before the disability.
With both the defense and prosecution's arguments complete, Judge LaFortune is about to make his decision.
I got a great deal of information about the defendant's age. His health condition was always presented to the court. It was kind of an unusual situation to have a defendant with those health conditions.
Judge LaFortune considers the family history that compelled Hayden, who was then a teenager, to shoot Roy.
And there was the history of domestic abuse in the household where he lived for many years.
But also the details of how the shooting played out.
The defendant hunted down the victim to confront him. Next, the defendant shot the victim multiple times, including shooting him in the back as he attempted to flee. Next, the defendant fled the scene, leaving the victim literally in the street. I do remember clearly the video depicting the victim lying in the street by himself as semi-truck trailers rolled by him, because it was so clearly shocking to see that kind of a scene. And then lastly, the defendant was dishonest with detectives after the incident. My experience has taught me that jurors, amazingly so, usually get it right. This court is of the opinion that I just don't see that there's any reason today to vary from my original sentence, so I'm going to deny the motion.
Well, the judge upheld it. I think it's the right decision.
The man, yes. Kevin Graves, he's great.
Roy's family, they've always been there. But today, when Judge LaFortune decided not to do anything further there, I think their confidence and their faith in the system was renewed. Judge Fortune did the right thing in going ahead and finally not only closing a chapter, but I think closing the book on Hayden Sainsbury.
It couldn't have been any better. That's what we was hoping. I was trying to keep composure, and it was important that they know how I felt.
It's just such a relief to know that finally Roy got what needed to be done.
There'll never be closure on the part of our son, but there's closure on Hayden's part, and justice was served.
Thank you.
wore these a lot.
Yes. He was on that new bicycle.
Bicycle.
And he had those on, driving down the street all the time.
I like to go down the road all the time while skating, and I have my headphones in.
Roy's son, Zeth, is ready to go through his father's belongings that were found at the scene that night.
I have to teach myself a lot of things that my dad should have taught me. I had to teach myself how to shave my face. I kind of got myself through my own heartbreak, and I feel like if my dad was there, he would have tried to teach me what to do about it and how to get through it.
And I do have a knife here that was his.
Can I have that, actually?
Yeah, let me go see if I can find that. When Zeth talks, you'll hear Roy. He sounds just like him. And sometimes, when I hear him talk, I just lose it. I want him to know just how important he was to his dad. I ain't seen this in a long time.
Can I see it?
Yeah. You can see how he made this to go around it.
There isn't really a lot you can do to make it easier on yourself. You just have to get through it. And it takes time, but you just gotta keep going. I really wish he was here.
The evidence had been sitting in a police evidence room for 37 years. A small plastic bag, a few strands of hair, and a label so old that the ink had almost disappeared. For decades, nobody knew whether those hairs belonged to the killer, the victim, or simply someone who had passed through the wrong place at the wrong time. Then, in 2026, a laboratory technician opened the bag. The results stunned the investigators. The DNA belonged to a man who had never been listed as a suspect. A man who had been questioned in 1989. A man who had looked directly into the eyes of detectives and told them he knew nothing. A man who had spent nearly 4 decades living quietly while one Michigan family waited for an answer. The case began on a cold October morning in 1989. The town was quiet. Too quiet. Leaves covered the sidewalks. A thin mist hung over the street. And inside a small apartment on the eastern edge of Lansing, 27-year-old Karen Whitmore was supposed to be getting ready for work. She never arrived. Her supervisor called her apartment shortly after 8. No answer. A second call. Nothing. By 9:30, co-workers were already talking. Karen never missed work without calling. She never disappeared without explanation. Her sister, Elaine, drove to the apartment. The front door was locked. There were no signs of forced entry. Inside, everything appeared normal. A coffee cup sat beside the sink. Karen's purse was gone. Her coat was gone. Her keys were missing. But her bedroom looked untouched. Her bed was made. Her photographs remained on the dresser. Her favorite necklace was still hanging beside the mirror. Elaine immediately called police. At first, officers believed Karen had simply left. Maybe she had gone somewhere. Maybe she needed time alone. Maybe there was an explanation. Then they found her car. It was parked nearly 6 miles away. The driver's door was slightly open. The engine was cold. Karen's keys were inside. Her purse was on the passenger seat, and on the floor beneath the steering wheel was a single earring, one of Karen's favorite earrings. The other was still inside her apartment. That detail changed everything. This was no longer a missing person investigation. Something had happened between her apartment and that abandoned parking lot, but nobody knew what. A nearby gas station had a security camera. The footage was grainy, black and white. Investigators watched it frame by frame. At 7:42 p.m. the previous evening, Karen's car appeared. It stopped near the edge of the lot. Karen stepped out. She looked toward the road. Then another vehicle entered the frame, a dark sedan. Karen appeared to recognize the driver. She walked towards the vehicle. The camera could not capture the driver's face, but it captured something else. Karen opened the passenger door. She got inside. The sedan remained there for approximately 3 minutes. Then it drove away. Karen's car remained behind. Investigators had their first major question: who was driving the sedan? The vehicle was eventually identified as a dark blue Chevrolet, but the license plate could not be read. The image was too blurred. The original detectives questioned Karen's friends, her coworkers, her neighbors, her former boyfriend, her landlord. Everyone had a theory. Nobody had an answer. Then a witness came forward. A truck driver claimed he had seen Karen arguing with a man near the parking lot. He described him as tall, dark hair, gray jacket. The witness remembered one strange detail. The man kept looking over his shoulder, as if he was afraid someone was watching him. Police created a sketch. It was released to the public. For several days, tips flooded the department. Most were useless. Some were contradictory. Then one caller said the face looked familiar. He gave investigators a name: Thomas Reed. Reed was 34. He worked as a mechanic. He lived less than 10 miles from Karen, and he owned a dark blue Chevrolet. Detectives questioned him. Reed admitted knowing Karen. They had worked in the same building several years earlier, but he denied seeing her that night. He said he had been home, alone. No witnesses, no receipts, no phone records, nothing. His story was weak, but weak was not the same as guilty. Police searched his vehicle. Nothing. They searched his apartment. Nothing. They checked his clothing. Nothing. Reed remained free. And then the case went cold. Weeks became months. Months became years. Karen's photograph remained on the department bulletin board. Her family refused to stop looking. Every birthday hurt. Every holiday became a reminder. Her mother kept Karen's bedroom exactly as she had left it. The necklace remained on the dresser. The missing earring was never recovered. The investigation was reopened several times. Each time, the same evidence was reviewed. The same interviews. The same photographs. The same dead ends. And always the same question: who was the man in the parking lot? 37 years later, investigators would finally ask a different question: who had touched Karen's clothing? That question led them back to the evidence room. A forensic team began re-examining every surviving item: Karen's jacket, her earring, the floor mat from the vehicle, a paper receipt recovered from the parking lot, and a small envelope containing several strands of hair. The envelope had been collected from Karen's jacket in 1989. At the time, investigators had no way to identify DNA from such a small sample. The evidence was stored, then forgotten. Technology changed. DNA testing improved. Genetic databases expanded. And suddenly, evidence, once considered useless, could speak. The laboratory separated the hair from the envelope. At first, there was no usable profile. The sample was too degraded. Technicians tried again, then again. Finally, they obtained a partial male profile. It was not Karen. It was not Thomas Reed. And it was not anyone in the original suspect database. The investigators stared at the result. A stranger had left biological material on Karen's clothing. But there was more. The same male profile appeared in another piece of evidence: a tiny sample taken from the interior door handle of Karen's abandoned car. 2 locations, 2 samples, 1 unidentified man. The case suddenly had a new direction. Investigators searched the National Genetic Database. Nothing. No direct match. Then they turned to investigative genetic genealogy. The search produced a distant family connection. A surname appeared: Morrison. Investigators followed the family tree. They found several possibilities. Most were eliminated. One remained: a man named David Morrison, born in Michigan, born in 1958, worked around Lansing in the late 1980s. No serious criminal record. No connection to Karen in the original case file. And one more detail: he had owned a dark blue Chevrolet in 1989. The investigators requested additional records. Morrison had lived only 4 miles from Karen's apartment. He had worked nights. And according to an old employment record, he had finished his shift at 6:30 p.m. on the night Karen disappeared, exactly 72 minutes before her car appeared on the parking lot camera. The coincidence was impossible to ignore, but detectives still needed more. Morrison had died in 2019. He could never be interviewed. He could never explain where he had been. He could never deny knowing Karen. So investigators turned to his family. His daughter agreed to speak. She remembered her father. She remembered his blue Chevrolet. And she remembered something else. A photograph. Her father standing beside the vehicle in 1989. On the passenger seat was a woman's handbag. The daughter had always assumed it belonged to her mother, but her mother had never owned that style. Investigators examined the photograph. The handbag looked remarkably similar to the one Karen had carried. Then the daughter said something that made the room go silent. Her father had once told her, some things from that year should stay buried. She had thought it was an old man's regret. Now detectives wondered if it had been a confession disguised as a warning. The photograph was sent to the laboratory. Digital enhancement revealed a small reflection in the vehicle window. A woman's face. The image was too poor for identification, but the clothing was visible. Karen's sister later said the woman appeared to be wearing the same coat Karen owned. The investigation had changed completely. For 37 years, Karen Whitmore had been a missing woman. Now investigators believed they were looking at a homicide, and the DNA had given them their first possible link to the person who had been inside her car. But there was one problem. The DNA belonged to David Morrison, a dead man, and nobody could yet prove he had killed Karen. The case needed something more. Something that connected Morrison not only to the evidence, but to the final moments of Karen's life. Investigators returned to the old parking lot. The landscape had changed. The gas station was gone. The trees were taller. The road had been widened. But beneath the modern surface, the past was still there. An investigator walked the perimeter, then stopped near a drainage ditch. Something metallic was visible beneath the leaves. A small object, rusting, almost completely buried. He picked it up. It was a key, stamped with a number. The number matched an old storage facility, a facility that had been rented in 1989, and the name on the original rental agreement was not Thomas Reed. It was David Morrison, the same man whose DNA had just appeared on Karen's clothing, the same man who owned the dark blue Chevrolet, the same man who had never been identified as a suspect. And suddenly, the cold case that had haunted Michigan for nearly 4 decades had a new name at its center. But the key opened something investigators had not searched in 1989, something that had been sealed, forgotten, and left untouched for 37 years. And whatever waited behind that door could finally reveal what happened to Karen Whitmore. The storage unit had been forgotten for 37 years. The rental company had changed owners twice. The original building had been scheduled for demolition, but the old record survived. David Morrison had rented Unit 17 on October 11th, Sill, 1989. 9 days after Karen disappeared, he had paid 6 months in cash. Then he never returned. Investigators stood outside the rusted metal door with the original key in hand. Nobody spoke. The lock resisted at first. Then it turned. The door rolled upward. Dust filled the air. Inside were cardboard boxes, an old workbench, a broken chair, several rusted tools, and a wooden cabinet pushed against the back wall. Nothing immediately connected Morrison to Karen. Then one investigator noticed something beneath the workbench. A woman's shoe, brown leather, old, covered in dust. Karen's sister later identified it as belonging to her. The room changed instantly. The investigation was no longer theoretical. Karen had been inside that storage unit, or at least something belonging to her had. Investigators searched every inch. Behind the wooden cabinet, they found a small metal box. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Karen, at work, leaving her apartment, walking through a grocery store, standing beside her car. Someone had been watching her for weeks. Some photographs were dated September, October. The final photograph was taken on October 10th, one day before Morrison rented the storage unit. Karen was standing outside her apartment. On the back, written in black ink, were 3 words: "She knows too much." The investigators stared at each other. Then another photograph was found. This one showed Karen beside a man. The image had been taken from a distance. The man was partially turned away. Gray jacket, dark hair, tall. The same description given by the truck driver, but this time his face was visible. It was David Morrison. For the first time, investigators had a direct visual connection. Morrison had been following Karen, but the photographs revealed something even stranger. Several showed Karen meeting another man, Thomas Reed, the original suspect. Again and again, Reed had lied when he told police he barely knew Karen. The photographs suggested otherwise. They had met several times, sometimes outside her workplace, sometimes near restaurants, sometimes in parking lots. And one photograph showed Reed handing Karen a folder, a thick folder. Karen appeared frightened. Investigators enlarged the image. Written on the folder was a company name, Midland Industrial Services. The company had closed in 1994. Its records were archived. Investigators searched them. The company had employed both Morrison and Reed, not at the same time, but their employment overlapped for 8 months in 1989. That meant the two men knew each other. Suddenly, the original investigation looked very different. Reed had not been an unrelated former acquaintance. He and Morrison had worked together. They both knew Karen, and both had lied. Investigators returned to the original interview transcripts. Reed had claimed he had never spoken to Morrison, but a payroll record showed they had worked the same shift for months. Reed had denied knowing about the storage unit, yet his fingerprint was found on one of the original rental forms. The fingerprint was not enough to prove involvement in murder, but it proved Reed had lied. Again, investigators searched his old residence. The house had changed owners, but the basement remained mostly untouched. A former owner remembered finding a metal trunk beneath the stairs. He had thrown it away years earlier, but he remembered the initials burned into the lid. DM. David Morrison. The former owner had photographed the trunk before discarding it. The photograph was recovered. Investigators enhanced it. Inside the trunk had been a stack of old newspapers. One headline concerned Karen's disappearance. The date was October 15th, still 1989. The photograph showed the newspaper open to the article, but beneath the newspaper was another item, a handwritten map, the same storage unit, the same parking lot, and a third location, an abandoned farmhouse outside Lansing. The farmhouse no longer existed, but the property remained. Investigators searched the land. Ground-penetrating radar detected disturbed soil near an old concrete foundation. They excavated. Nothing. They searched again. Still nothing. Then a forensic technician found a small metal clasp. The clasp was corroded. Karen's sister recognized it immediately. It belonged to Karen's missing necklace. The necklace itself had never been recovered, only the clasp. It was enough to prove Karen had been there. But why? The investigation moved back to the storage unit. A second search was conducted. This time, investigators removed the wooden cabinet from the wall. Behind it was a narrow cavity. Inside was an envelope. The envelope contained a handwritten letter. The handwriting was Karen's. It was dated October 9th, still 1989, 2 days before she disappeared. The letter began with a sentence that stunned investigators. If something happens to me, look at Thomas. Morales read it several times. Karen believed Thomas Reed was involved, but the letter continued. He is not the only one. Then came a name, David Morrison. Karen had apparently discovered something about the two men, something connected to Midland Industrial Services. The final paragraph was partially damaged. Only fragments remained. Money. Files. They know. And finally, I cannot trust anyone. The letter ended there. For 37 years, investigators had believed Karen's disappearance was personal. Now it appeared connected to something larger, financial fraud, missing records, two men who worked together, and a woman who had discovered too much. Investigators searched Midland Industrial Services. The company had been involved in equipment leasing, but financial records revealed unexplained transactions, large payments, shell companies, fake invoices. Money moved through several accounts. Karen had worked temporarily in the company's accounting department. That explained everything. She had access. She had seen the numbers. She had noticed something wrong. And someone realized she had noticed. Investigators followed the money. One company received repeated payments. The company was registered to a post office box. No employees. No office. The director was listed as an attorney named Robert Hale. Hale had died in 2003. His estate contained almost nothing, but his former secretary remembered one client, David Morrison. She said Morrison had visited the office several times in 1989, always alone, always carrying documents. And once, he brought another man, Thomas Reed. The secretary remembered them arguing. She remembered Morrison saying, She has copies. Reed replied. Then get them. The secretary had never understood who they were talking about. Now detectives knew. Karen. Investigators obtained the surviving phone records. 3 calls were made from Morrison's home to Reed's residence during the week Karen disappeared. The longest lasted 19 minutes. Another call was placed from a payphone near Karen's apartment. The number was registered to the storage facility. The call occurred less than an hour before Karen's car was found. The timeline was tightening. But there was still one missing piece. Where was Karen? The storage unit contained her belongings. The farmhouse contained evidence. The car contained DNA. But Karen herself had never been found. Investigators searched historical property map. The farmhouse had once stood beside a drainage canal. The canal had been rerouted in 1998. Part of the original channel had been filled. Ground-penetrating radar revealed another anomaly, a long depression beneath the soil. Investigators excavated. At first, they found nothing. Then a fragment of fabric. Then bone. The site was sealed. Forensic specialists worked carefully. The remains were badly decomposed. But dental records provided an identification. Karen Whitmore. 37 years after she disappeared, the family finally had an answer. But the answer was devastating. Karen had been buried on property connected to David Morrison. The autopsy revealed a fracture to the skull. Cause of death: blunt force, trauma, homicide. The case had finally become a murder investigation. The DNA from the car, the hair from Karen's jacket, the storage unit, the photographs, the letter, the farmhouse, and now Karen's remains. Everything pointed toward Morrison. But there was still a problem. Morrison had been dead for 7 years. The investigators could never put him in a courtroom unless someone else had helped him. Thomas Reed was still alive, 71 years old, living in another Michigan county. He had spent 37 years denying involvement. Now police returned to his door. He opened it slowly. When he saw the detectives, his face changed. One detective said only one sentence: "We found Karen." Reed closed his eyes. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he whispered, "I knew you would." The investigators entered. Reed sat down. His hands were shaking. He asked whether Morrison had been identified. They told him yes. Reed looked towards the floor. David did it. The detectives waited. Then why did you lie? Reed swallowed. Because I helped him. The confession was quiet, almost emotionless, but it changed everything. Reed admitted he had helped Morrison follow Karen. He admitted he had helped rent the storage unit. He admitted he had moved boxes. But he insisted he never struck Karen. Who did? Reed looked at the detectives. David. Why? Because she found the accounts. What accounts? The money. Where did it go? Reed shook his head. I don't know. You expect us to believe that? I never knew where it ended. Then Reed said something that stopped the interview. David wasn't the one giving orders. The detectives looked at him. Who was? Reed refused to answer. He asked for a lawyer. The interview ended. But investigators were not finished. They searched Reed's old financial records. One payment stood out. A large cash deposit, made 3 days after Karen disappeared. The money came from an account controlled by a company in another state. The company was linked to Robert Hale, the attorney who had represented Morrison, and the same attorney whose secretary remembered Morrison and Reed arguing. The money trail now suggested someone had paid Reed for his silence. But who? Investigators searched Hale's records. They found a second name, a man who had never appeared in the original case, Samuel Vance. Vance had been a senior executive at Midland Industrial Services. He had supervised the department where Karen worked. He had signed several suspicious financial documents, and he had left Michigan immediately after Karen disappeared. He moved to Florida, changed careers, started a new company, and lived there for decades. Investigators checked his history. No criminal record, no suspicious activity, a respected businessman, a father, a grandfather, a man who had successfully erased himself from the story, until investigators found one photograph, taken outside Midland Industrial Services in 1989. Karen stood near the entrance. Beside her was Samuel Vance, and behind them, partially hidden, stood David Morrison. The photograph had been taken 3 days before Karen disappeared. On the back was a handwritten note. Vance knows. The same handwriting as Karen's letter. The same black ink. The same distinctive slant. Karen had been watching him. And now investigators had a new possibility. Morrison may have been the killer. Reed may have been an accomplice. But Samuel Vance may have been the man who knew why Karen had to die. And if that was true, then the DNA breakthrough had not solved the case. It had only opened the door. Because the man whose DNA had been sitting in evidence for 37 years might have been only the hand that carried out the crime. The person who ordered it could still be alive, still free, still living under his own name, and still unaware that investigators had finally found the trail leading directly to his door. The name Samuel Vance changed the direction of the investigation. For 37 years, detectives had searched for the man who had been seen with Karen Whitmore on the night she vanished. Now they were asking a different question. Who had wanted her silent? Vance had been the perfect candidate for a hidden motive. He was not a stranger. He was not an outsider. He had worked above Karen. He had access to the company's finances. He knew which records she could see. He knew which employees had access to those records. And according to Karen's own handwriting, he knew something. But suspicion was not enough. Investigators needed proof. They began with the financial records. The old company had been dissolved decades earlier, but archived documents revealed a pattern that had escaped the original investigation. Money had moved from Midland Industrial Services into several small companies. Those companies had almost no legitimate business. One belonged to Robert Hale. Another belonged to an associate of David Morrison. A third led back to a holding company registered in Florida. The director of that holding company was Samuel Vance. The transactions were small enough to avoid attention individually. Together, they represented hundreds of thousands of dollars. Karen had been working in accounting when she began noticing them. She had apparently created her own list. Dates, amounts, account numbers, names. And besides several transactions, one word appeared repeatedly: missing. Investigators believed Karen had been preparing to expose the scheme. That explained the photographs, the surveillance, the threats, the confrontation. But it did not explain why Morrison's DNA had been found on Karen's clothing. It did not explain why Reed had helped Morrison. And it did not explain why Vance had disappeared from Michigan immediately afterward. Detectives located Vance in Florida. He was 81. He lived in a quiet coastal community. Neighbors described him as polite, private, generous. He attended local charity events. He donated money to community organizations. Nobody suspected anything. When investigators arrived at his home, Vance was sitting on the porch. He looked at the detectives, then at the photograph they carried. Karen. His expression changed. Only for a second. But they saw it. One detective asked, "Do you remember Karen Whitmore?" Vance replied, "Of course. She worked for you." "Yes." "When did you last see her?" Vance thought for several seconds. "Years ago. October 1989? He looked away. "I don't remember the exact date." That answer was the first problem. Karen's disappearance had been one of the most significant events of Vance's life. Yet he could not remember when he last saw her. Investigators entered with a warrant. The house was carefully organized. Financial documents, old photographs, tax records. Nothing obvious. Then they searched the garage. A locked cabinet stood against the back wall. Inside were old company files. Most were harmless. Payroll records, invoices, contracts. Then investigators found a folder marked NIS 1989. Inside were copies of financial documents. Some had never appeared in the original investigation. One page contained Karen's handwriting. Vance had kept it. Why? The paper was tested. The fingerprints were too degraded. But another object inside the folder produced a partial fingerprint, a metal paper clip. The print belonged to David Morrison. That connected Morrison to Vance. But there was more. A handwritten note appeared on the back of the page. She copied the ledger. The handwriting was not Morrison. It appeared consistent with Vance. Vance denied writing it. He said he had no idea how it got there. The detectives asked him about Morrison. "I knew him professionally." "How well?" "Not well." "Did he work for you?" "Sometimes." "Did he own a blue Chevrolet?" "I don't remember." "Did he rent a storage unit?" "I wouldn't know." "Did he know Karen?" Vance paused. "Probably." The answers were careful. Too careful. Investigators returned to Michigan. They interviewed Karen's sister again. Elaine remembered something from 1989 that she had forgotten. 2 days before Karen disappeared, Karen called her. She sounded frightened. Elaine remembered asking what was wrong. Karen had said, "I think someone at work is following me." Elaine asked who. Karen never gave a name, but she said something else. "If I stop calling, don't believe everything they tell you." Elaine had assumed Karen meant her coworker. Now that sentence seemed much darker. Investigators searched Karen's phone record. One call stood out. A call to a number belonging to Samuel Vance. The call lasted 17 minutes. It was made the night before Karen disappeared. Vance had denied speaking to her that night. The record proved he had lied. Detectives confronted him again. This time, his answer changed. "Yes, she called me." What did she want? She was upset. Why? She accused me of hiding money. Was she right? No. Then why did she sound frightened? Because she misunderstood what she found. What did she find? Vance refused to answer. The detectives pushed harder. He finally said, "She had documents that could have ruined people." Which people? Vance looked at them. "I don't remember." But his own records suggested otherwise. A week later, investigators discovered another connection. Vance had transferred money to Morrison. The payment occurred 4 days before Karen disappeared. The amount was significant. The transfer description was vague. Consulting services. Morrison had never been a consultant. He was a mechanic. The payment was not legitimate. Then another transfer appeared. To Thomas Reed. 3 days after Karen disappeared. The same amount. The same vague description. The pattern was becoming unmistakable. Money moved from Vance. Money went to Morrison. Money went to Reed. Karen disappeared. Then Reed received another payment. Investigators now had a possible motive, a possible chain of command, and physical evidence. But they still needed to prove what happened that night. The answer came from an unexpected place. A retired tow truck operator named Frank Delaney contacted police. He had seen the news about the case reopening. He remembered Karen's car. He had been called to tow it in 1989, but he remembered something the original investigators had never asked. Before he reached the parking lot, he had seen another vehicle, a dark blue Chevrolet, parked behind an abandoned warehouse. The driver was standing outside. Delaney remembered the man because he had asked him for directions. The man was David Morrison. Delaney had never told police because nobody asked him about the surrounding area. He had assumed it was irrelevant. But there was more. Morrison had asked him whether the road behind the warehouse was still accessible. Delaney said yes. The road led toward the drainage canal, the same area where Karen's remains were eventually found. That detail placed Morrison near the burial site. Investigators searched the area again. They found tire impressions preserved in old photographs. The original crime scene team had photographed the dirt road. One set of tracks matched the approximate tread pattern of Morrison's Chevrolet. Modern comparison could not provide absolute certainty, but it was another link. Then came the breakthrough investigators had been waiting for. The DNA profile from Karen's jacket was compared against a sample from Morrison's preserved medical records. It matched. Not partially, not approximately, directly. David Morrison's DNA was on Karen's clothing. The same man had owned the vehicle seen near the parking lot. The same man had rented the storage unit. The same man had been photographed following Karen. The same man had received money from Vance. And the same man had connections to Thomas Reed. The cold case suddenly had a physical anchor. But there was still one question. Why had Morrison never been arrested? Because in 1989, the technology did not exist. Investigators had suspected him. They had searched his vehicle. They had questioned him. But they had not found enough. His alibi was weak. His behavior was suspicious. But suspicion could not put a man in prison. Then investigators examined the original interview again. Morrison had been asked whether he knew Karen. He said no. He had been asked whether he owned a dark blue Chevrolet. He said yes. He had been asked where he was on the night Karen disappeared. He said he was home. Then the detective asked, "Did you ever rent a storage unit?" Morrison had looked down, only for a second. Then he said, No. The newly discovered rental agreement proved he had. The lie was now undeniable. But Morrison was dead. There would be no arrest, no interrogation. No courtroom confession. The investigators needed someone alive who could tell them what happened. Thomas Reed became that person. Detectives returned to him with the DNA report. They placed it on the table. Reed stared at the result, then lowered his head. I knew it. You knew what? That they would eventually find it. Who is they? Karen. The detectives looked at each other. Reed's voice became quieter. She told us she had hidden copies. Where? I don't know. Who killed her? Reed closed his eyes. David. Who ordered him? Silence. Was it Vance? Reed did not answer. Was it Samuel Vance? Reed's hands began shaking. Finally, he whispered, Vance didn't order David. The room went silent. Then who did? Reed looked toward the door. Nobody ordered him. Then why did he do it? Reed swallowed. Because David believed Karen was going to expose him. That answer changed everything. Morrison may have acted independently. Vance may have been involved in the financial scheme. Reed may have helped conceal the crime. But the case was not yet solved, because Reed then revealed one final detail. On the night Karen disappeared, Morrison was not alone. Someone else was in the car. A second person. A person Reed had never identified to police. A person who had arrived at the parking lot before Morrison. A person who had taken Karen's purse. A person who had removed the ledger from her apartment. And according to Reed, that person was the one Karen feared most. The detectives asked for the name. Reed stared at them for several seconds. Then he finally spoke. Samuel Vance. The room went completely silent. The man investigators had suspected of ordering the murder was now being placed directly at the scene. But there was one problem. Vance had spent 37 years denying it. And he was still alive. Still free. Still capable of destroying whatever evidence remained. When detectives returned to Florida, they discovered something terrifying. Vance's house was empty. His phone was disconnected. His bank accounts had been accessed, and his passport had been renewed only 6 weeks earlier. He had known the investigation was coming. Someone had warned him. The question was who? Then, at 2:13 a.m., Morales received a photograph from an unknown number. It showed Vance standing inside a train station, alive, watching the camera. And beside him was a woman. A woman Morales recognized instantly. Karen Whitmore's younger sister, Elaine. The message beneath the photograph contained only 4 words. Come find the truth. The photograph was impossible. Elaine Whitmore had spent 37 years demanding answers about her sister. Now she was standing beside Samuel Vance inside a train station. Morales stared at the image until her eyes hurt. Then she called Elaine. No answer. Again. Nothing. A third time. Straight to voicemail. The photograph had been taken recently. The timestamp placed it less than an hour before it reached Morales. That meant Elaine was either in immediate danger or part of something investigators had completely misunderstood. Morales sent officers to Elaine's home. The house was empty. Her car was still in the driveway. Her purse was on the kitchen counter. Her keys were beside it. But her phone was gone. On the dining table sat a handwritten note. 3 words. I know now. Morales felt the case becoming something much larger than a murder investigation. She ordered the train station sealed. Officers arrived within minutes. But Vance and Elaine were gone. Security footage showed them leaving through a side entrance. They had not been running. They had not appeared frightened. They walked calmly, almost as if they knew exactly where they were going. Investigators tracked the security camera. A second camera captured them entering a parking garage. Then another showed Elaine getting into a dark sedan. The vehicle disappeared from the area. Its license plate was registered to a rental company. The rental agreement had been made under the name Thomas Reed. Morales stared at the screen. Reed was supposed to be under police supervision. He had not been released. He had been taken into protective custody. Someone else had used his identity. Someone with access to the original case information. The investigation turned inward. Who knew about the photograph? Who knew Elaine was being questioned? Who knew Morales had spoken to Reed? The list was short. Very short. Morales realized something uncomfortable. The killer had been receiving information from inside the investigation. The anonymous messages. The photographs. The hidden ledger. Every clue had appeared just when investigators needed it. Someone had been guiding them. And now that someone had taken Elaine, Morales ordered every communication connected to the case reviewed. One phone number appeared repeatedly, a disposable device. It had contacted investigators after each major discovery. The first message arrived after Morrison's DNA was identified. The second arrived after Rachel Monroe's remains were found. The third came after Victor Shaw disappeared. The fourth was the photograph of Elaine. The device had always been near the investigation, but it never remained active long enough to trace. Then a technician noticed something. The messages had been sent from locations near police facilities, not random locations. The sender had repeatedly been within several blocks of the department. Someone was watching the investigators. Morales searched surveillance footage. At first, nothing. Then a face appeared. An older man wearing a gray jacket. He walked past the station shortly before one of the messages was sent. The face was unclear, but the clothing was familiar. Gray jacket. Mr. Gray. Morales enlarged the footage. The man turned. For less than a second, his face was visible. The image was enhanced. The laboratory compared it with old photographs. No definitive identification. But one investigator recognized the posture, the way he walked, the way he held his shoulders. It reminded him of someone from the original case, David Morrison. Impossible. Morrison had been dead since 2019. The investigator checked again. It wasn't Morrison, but the resemblance raised another possibility. Someone had copied the appearance of the man investigators had been searching for. Someone wanted them to believe Morrison was still controlling events. The real question became, who benefited from that deception? Morales returned to the photograph of Elaine and Vance. She noticed something in the background. A station sign. Not the city. A train number. 684. Investigators traced the route. Train 684 had departed 20 minutes after the photograph was taken. Destination: Chicago. Morales contacted authorities. The train was stopped. Passengers were searched. Elaine was not aboard. Neither was Vance. But a passenger matching Vance's description had boarded at the previous station. He had used a ticket purchased under the name Robert Hale, the dead attorney. Again, another identity. Another dead man. Another layer of deception. Morales began to suspect that Vance had planned his escape years before the investigation reopened. He had access to multiple identities, money, connections, and enough knowledge to stay ahead of police. But why take Elaine? That question was answered when investigators searched Elaine's home again. Behind a framed photograph of Karen, they found a small envelope. Inside was a key. The key was old, stamped with the number 17. The same storage unit Morrison had rented. Elaine had kept it hidden for 37 years. Morales called her mother. The elderly woman remembered the key. She said Karen had given it to Elaine shortly before disappearing. Karen had told her, "If anything happens, don't give this to the police." The family had obeyed. For decades. Elaine had apparently never told investigators, but now someone knew she had it, and whoever knew wanted it. Morales returned to the storage facility. Unit 17 had already been searched, but the key suggested another lock. Investigators examined the building plan. There was a second door behind the unit, a maintenance corridor. It connected to an underground service room. The original detectives had never documented it. The door was locked. The key fit. Inside was a narrow chamber. There was an old desk, a filing cabinet, and a small tape recorder. On the desk sat a photograph of Karen. Behind it was a handwritten note. She trusted her sister. Morales played the recorder. Static. Then Karen's voice. "I don't know who I can trust anymore." A pause. "I gave Elaine a copy." Morales stopped breathing. Karen continued. "If they come for me, she knows where it is." The recording ended. Elaine had not been kidnapped because she was simply Karen's sister. She had been targeted because Karen trusted her with evidence. Morales searched the chamber. The filing cabinet contained nothing, but the desk had a false bottom. Inside was a thin envelope. The envelope contained photocopies of financial records and one photograph, Karen standing beside Samuel Vance. But this photograph was different. It had been taken inside the company office. Karen was holding a folder. Vance was standing behind her. His hand was on her shoulder. Both were smiling. On the back, Karen had written, "He thinks I trust him." Morales studied the image. Then she noticed something behind Vance. A wall calendar. The date was September 1989. The photograph had been taken 1 month before Karen disappeared. Vance had been close to her, closer than anyone knew. The investigation now had a motive. Karen had discovered financial crimes. She had copied records. She had trusted Elaine with evidence. Vance knew. Morrison knew. Reed knew. And somehow, all three men had become connected to the disappearance. But there was still no definitive proof Vance had ordered the killing. Then the laboratory delivered a new result. DNA had been recovered from the tape recorder. 2 profiles. One belonged to Karen. The second belonged to Samuel Vance. Vance had touched the recorder. That alone did not prove murder. But the recorder had been hidden after Karen disappeared. Why would Vance's DNA be on it? Morales compared the sample with DNA recovered from the storage room. Same profile. Vance had been inside. The evidence was becoming overwhelming. But there was still one problem. Where was Vance? The search expanded across 3 states. Bank accounts, credit cards, rental vehicles, airports, train stations, private aircraft. Nothing. Then investigators found an old property connected to Vance's family, a cabin in northern Michigan. It had not been visited in years, but electricity records showed recent use. Police surrounded it before dawn. Inside, they found food, fresh, a coat, a newspaper, and a suitcase. But no Vance. The suitcase contained documents, passports, cash, and photographs. One photograph showed Karen. Another showed Elaine. Another showed Morales. The detective stared at her own photograph. It had been taken outside the police station, only days earlier. Someone had been following her. The case had become personal. Then a sound came from outside. An engine. Police rushed toward the road. A dark sedan accelerated away. Officers pursued. The chase ended near an abandoned logging road. The sedan crashed into a ditch. The driver escaped into the woods. Inside the vehicle was a briefcase. The briefcase contained the black ledger. The original. 37 years missing. It was finally in police hands. Every page was there. Every transaction. Every payment. Every name. The ledger revealed that Karen had not simply discovered financial fraud. She had discovered an organized network. Money had been moved through several companies. Employees had been paid to falsify records. Vehicles had been used to transport stolen equipment. And payments had been made to people connected to law enforcement. One page contained a handwritten entry. KW problem. Beside it, Morrison handled. And below that, Vance approve. Morales stared at the words. Morrison had been instructed to handle Karen. Vance had approved it. But there was another entry, one that had been almost completely erased. Forensic Enhancement recovered the letter. R.H. Robert Hale, the attorney, dead. But the ledger suggested he had been part of the operation. The investigation was finally seeing the structure. Vance was not acting alone. Morrison was the enforcer. Reed was the helper. Hale was the legal shield. Others had moved money. Others had protected the scheme. Karen had stumbled into all of it. And when she refused to remain silent, she became the target. But one question remained. Why had Elaine disappeared? The answer came hours later. Elaine was found at an abandoned railway depot, alive, uninjured. She had been left there. Beside her was a note. She wanted you to know. Elaine told investigators what happened. Vance had approached her. He said he wanted to explain. He claimed Karen had trusted him. He claimed Morrison had acted without permission. He claimed the entire murder had been a mistake. Elaine did not believe him. She said Vance had one final message. Tell them the ledger doesn't contain everything. Then he left. Elaine looked at Morales. There was another book. What book? Karen told me about it. Where is it? Elaine shook her head. I don't know. What did she call it? Elaine's eyes filled with tears. The red book. Morales felt the case open again. The black ledger showed the money. But the red book supposedly contained something more dangerous. Names. Perhaps photographs. Perhaps evidence of the murders. And if Vance was still running, he might be trying to find it before police did. Then Elaine remembered one final detail. Karen had once told her, if they ever find the black book, they'll know who paid. But the red book will tell them who killed. Morales stared at her. For 37 years, Karen Whitmore had been silent. Now, piece by piece, her own words were speaking for her. The black ledger had exposed the network. The DNA had linked Morrison to Karen. The evidence had placed Vance inside the hidden storage room, and the surviving witnesses had begun to break their silence. But somewhere, the red book remained hidden, and whoever found it first could finally reveal whether Samuel Vance had ordered Karen's death, or whether someone even more powerful had been standing behind him all along. The red book had never appeared in the original evidence file. That was the first thing Morales could not explain. If Karen had truly hidden a second ledger, why had nobody found it in 37 years? She searched the old reports again. Every box, every drawer, every sealed evidence envelope. Nothing. Then Elaine remembered something that changed the search. Karen had not called it a ledger. She had called it a book. A personal book. Something small enough to hide. Something she could carry without attracting attention. Elaine remembered seeing it once. Red leather cover. No title. No markings. Karen had kept it inside a locked desk drawer until the week she disappeared. Then it vanished. Morales asked Elaine where Karen kept the drawer. At her apartment. Investigators returned to the apartment building. It had been renovated several times. The original unit no longer existed in its original form, but the floor plan remained. Karen's bedroom had been smaller than investigators remembered. A wall had been added during renovation. Morales stopped. How long has that wall been here? The property manager checked the records. Less than a year after Karen disappeared. The wall had been constructed by the landlord. Why? The answer was in an old invoice. The work had been requested by a man named David Morrison. Morales stared at the document. Morrison had paid for the renovation. A month after Karen disappeared. That was not a coincidence. The wall was scanned. Round penetrating equipment detected a hollow space behind it. Workers carefully removed a section of drywall. Inside was a narrow wooden compartment. Empty. Except for one object. A red leather thread. A single fragment. The book had been there. Someone had removed it. Morales immediately suspected Morrison. But Morrison was dead. And if he had taken the book, where had he put it? The answer could be buried somewhere in his records. Investigators searched his old property again. This time, they examined every photograph. One showed Morrison standing beside his garage. Behind him was a metal cabinet. On top of the cabinet sat a red object. The image was enhanced. It was the same shade of red. A book. But the photograph had been taken in 1992, 3 years after Karen disappeared. Morrison still had it. Then investigators learned something even stranger. Morrison had visited a private storage facility in 1997. He rented another unit. Unit 42. The facility had closed in 2008. Its records were archived. Unit 42 had never been searched. Police obtained a warrant. The lock was opened. Inside were old tools, clothing, boxes of documents, and a red leather book. Morales opened it carefully. The first pages were filled with numbers, names, dates, addresses, then photographs. Not Karen. Other women. Some had been reported missing. Some had never been officially reported. The room went silent. The case had just expanded beyond Michigan. There were 12 names, 12 women. Several disappeared between 1987 and 1991. One was from Ohio, another from Indiana, 2 from Illinois, 3 from Michigan. All had one connection. They had worked for companies connected to the same financial network. Morales turned another page. At the bottom was a handwritten phrase. They all saw the same thing. The next page contained a map, a series of locations, warehouses, truck yards, private offices, and one location circled in red, a property in northern Michigan, the same property where Vance's cabin stood. Morales looked at the map again. Vance had not simply known Karen. He had been connected to a much larger operation. But the book contained something even more disturbing. A page dated October 10th, still 1989, the day before Karen vanished. Beside it were 3 initials, KW, DM, SV, and underneath, meeting tonight. There was no explanation, only another line. If she refuses, proceed. The handwriting appeared different from Morrison. Investigators sent it for comparison. The result was preliminary. But the writing appeared consistent with Samuel Vance. For the first time, investigators had a document suggesting a direct plan. Karen was the target. Morrison was involved. Vance knew, and the meeting was scheduled the night before her disappearance. But one question remained. What happened during that meeting? Investigators returned to the old parking lot. They reconstructed the timeline. Karen left her apartment. Her car appeared. Morrison's vehicle arrived. Karen entered the sedan. But there was another vehicle. A second car had been captured in the gas station footage. It had been overlooked because it appeared only for 11 seconds. A silver station wagon. The driver never exited. Investigators enhanced the image. The license plate became partially readable. The vehicle belonged to Midland Industrial Services, and the registered driver was Samuel Vance. The timeline was now devastating. Vance was there. Morrison was there. Karen was there. And shortly afterward, Karen disappeared. The black ledger showed payments. The red book showed names. The DNA connected Morrison to Karen. The photograph placed Vance near the scene. The vehicle records placed him there that night. But Vance was still missing. Investigators believed he had gone to the northern Michigan cabin. A second search was conducted. This time, officers searched the property underground. Beneath the cabin was an old storm shelter. The door had been concealed beneath wooden flooring. Inside was a chair, a table, several empty boxes, and a wall covered in photographs. Karen's photograph was in the center. Around it were photographs of the other women from the Red Book. Someone had been tracking them, studying them, watching them. On the table was a cassette recorder. The tape inside was labeled October 10th, Sill 1989. Morales played it. The recording began with static. Then Karen's voice. I found the transfers. A man's voice answered, You're mistaken. Karen replied, I have copies. The man's voice became harder. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Karen said, I understand perfectly. Then came a long silence. The man finally spoke. You should stop. Karen answered, No. The recording ended. Investigators listened again. The voice was distorted. But forensic audio specialists isolated it. They compared the speech pattern with recordings of Vance. The preliminary conclusion was not definitive, but the voice was consistent. Then another sound was identified. A metal door closing, and a vehicle engine. Morales recognized the sound. It matched the old Chevrolet model Morrison owned. The tape had been recorded inside the hidden room. Karen had been there. Morrison had been there. And someone else had been there. The recording continued for another 30 seconds after the conversation. This time, the voices were quieter. Karen said, David, please. Morrison answered, You shouldn't have copied it. Karen, Tom knows. Morrison, Tom won't help you. Then another voice. Vance, enough. The tape ended. There was no doubt now. All three men had been together. The final moments of Karen's freedom had been captured on tape. But the recording raised another question. If Vance had been there, why had he spent decades denying it? Because the Red Book revealed something bigger. Vance's name appeared beside multiple disappearances, not always as a suspect. Sometimes as a witness. Sometimes as an employer. Sometimes as the last person known to have spoken with the victim. The same pattern appeared again and again. A woman discovered financial irregularities. A woman confronted someone. A woman disappeared. And David Morrison appeared somewhere in the background. The Red Book had recorded the pattern long before investigators understood it. Morales turned to the final pages. There were only 4 entries. The first 3 contained names. The fourth contained no name, only a date. October 12th, Sill 1989, the day after Karen disappeared. Underneath it, the sister knows. Elaine. Karen had known that her sister was in danger. But why had Elaine survived? Morales called her. Elaine answered immediately. Did Karen ever tell you why she trusted you? Elaine was silent. Then she said, Because I wasn't supposed to know. What does that mean? I didn't know about the money. What did you know? Elaine began crying. I knew about the photographs. What photographs? Karen showed me pictures of people. Who? I don't know their names. Why did she show you? She said they were being watched. Morales felt the pieces move again. Karen had not simply discovered fraud. She had discovered surveillance. The financial operation was only part of it. Someone had been monitoring employees, tracking them, photographing them, and Morrison appeared to be the person doing the surveillance. But Vance had access to the company. He knew which employees were becoming problems. The system was organized, deliberate, and Karen had stumbled into it. Elaine then remembered one more detail. Karen had hidden something inside a church. Not the red book. Something else. A Cosette. She had told Elaine, "If anything happens, ask for Father Martin." Father Martin had died in 2006, but the church records remained. Investigators located his old personal archive. Inside was a sealed envelope. Karen's name was written on it. The envelope had never been opened. Morales broke the seal. Inside was a short note. "Father Martin, if I disappear, give this to the police only when Elaine asks for it." Below was an address and a warning. Do not trust anyone from Midland. The address belonged to an abandoned motel. Investigators searched the property. Room 12 had been demolished years earlier, but beneath the floorboards they found a metal box. Inside was a photograph. Karen, alive, taken on October 11th, Sill 1989. The photograph showed her sitting inside a car. Her hands were tied. She was looking directly into the camera. Behind the camera stood a man. Only his shadow was visible. But on the floor beside him was something unmistakable, a silver watch. The same watch Vance had been photographed wearing for decades. Morales compared the image. Same design, same scratch across the face, same band. Vance had been there. The evidence was becoming overwhelming. But the photograph contained one final detail. Karen was not alone. Someone else was sitting beside her. A man whose face was hidden, and on his wrist was a watch identical to Morrison. Two men, one woman, one car, one final night. The investigators now knew that Karen had been alive after leaving the parking lot. They knew Morrison and Vance were involved. They knew the financial motive. They knew the surveillance network. They knew the storage unit. They knew where Karen's remains were eventually found. But the red book contained something investigators had not yet decoded. A final series of numbers, 12 digits, repeated throughout the pages. At first, they appeared to be a count number. They were not. They were coordinates. Investigators entered them into a mapping system. The coordinates pointed to a remote property in Michigan. Not Vance's cabin. Not the farmhouse. Not the warehouse. A different location. An abandoned mining site. The place had been closed since the 1970s. No buildings remained. No roads appeared on modern maps. But the satellite imagery revealed something strange. A vehicle had recently been photographed near the property. A dark blue Chevrolet. Morales zoomed in. The image was only a few days old. Someone had returned. Someone connected to the old network. And if that person had the red book's coordinates, they might know exactly what investigators were about to find. Morales ordered the site surrounded. Before officers reached it, her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. Silence. Then a man's voice. Older. Calm. You found Karen. Morales said nothing. The voice continued. You found the black ledger. She asked. Who is this? A pause. Then. You found the red book too. Morales froze. The caller laughed softly. You think those books are evidence? Another pause. They are a warning. Then the line went dead. Morales immediately ordered officers to the mining site. But when they arrived, they found something worse than an empty property. They found fresh tire tracks, a recently extinguished fire, and a metal chair sitting alone in the middle of the clearing. On the chair was a single red rose. Underneath it was a photograph of Karen. Written across the back were 6 words. You still don't know who ordered it. The investigation had uncovered the murder. It had exposed the money. It had identified Morrison. It had implicated Vance. But the person behind the entire operation remained hidden. And somewhere in the evidence was a name that had not yet been understood. A name Karen had written only once. A name that investigators had overlooked for 37 years. A name that would soon force them to question every assumption they had made about the night she disappeared. The name appeared on a single page, almost invisible beneath a layer of dirt and age. Morales held the red book beneath the laboratory light. The handwriting was Karen's. The letters were cramped, uneven, as if she had been writing quickly. At the top of the page were 3 words. Not Vance, not Morrison. Below them was a name, Daniel Cross. Morales had never heard it before. Neither had the other detectives. But the name immediately entered the case file. Daniel Cross. Born in Michigan. Former regional manager for Midland Industrial Services. Resigned 3 weeks after Karen disappeared. Moved to Ohio. Changed his surname in business records. Then disappeared from corporate documents entirely. The timing was too precise. Investigators pulled his employment file. Cross had supervised Vance. Vance had supervised Karen. Morrison had worked security contracts under Cross's department. Thomas Reed had reported to Morrison. The structure was suddenly visible. Cross sat above all of them. But the red book contained something even more disturbing. Beside Cross's name was a date. October 8th, Sill 1989, 3 days before Karen disappeared. And underneath it, he knows about the second account. Investigators searched the financial records. There was a second account. Hidden behind layers of shell companies. Money had flowed into it for years. The balance in 1989 was enormous. But the account holder was not Vance. It was Daniel Cross. Morales realized Karen had discovered something that could destroy the entire network. She had not simply found stolen money. She had found the person controlling it. And Cross had vanished before anyone could question him. The investigation moved to Ohio. Cross had used several addresses over the decades. Most were dead ends. One address led to a suburban house, sold in 2018. Another led to a business office, closed in 2004. Then investigators found a retirement community. A resident named Daniel Crawford had lived there for 12 years. Crawford was 79. His photograph was compared with an old employee badge. The facial structure matched. The ears matched. A scar above his right eyebrow appeared in both images. Daniel Cross had not disappeared. He had changed his name. He had grown older. And he had been living quietly in plain sight. For 12 years, investigators watched the house. Crawford followed a predictable routine. Morning walk, coffee, newspaper, grocery store. Every Thursday, he visited a small veterans center. Nothing suspicious. No obvious connection to Michigan. No sign of fear. Then investigators noticed something. Every October, Crawford left town. Always for 3 or 4 days. Always alone. They checked his travel history. The destination was Michigan, the same county where Karen had disappeared. For 37 years, he had returned. Every year, on the anniversary of Karen's disappearance. Morales requested surveillance. Crawford drove north. He stopped at a cemetery. Not Karen's. Another cemetery. A small family cemetery outside Lansing. He walked to a grave. Investigators zoomed in. The name on the headstone was Evelyn Cross, his wife. She had died in 1992, 1 year after Karen disappeared. That discovery raised another question. Why had Crawford returned every year to his dead wife's grave? Then, an investigator checked Evelyn's employment history. She had worked at Midland Industrial Services. She had been Karen's direct supervisor. And according to company records, Evelyn had signed the final payroll documents connected to Karen. The investigation suddenly became a family affair. Daniel Cross, Evelyn Cross, Samuel Vance, David Morrison, Thomas Reed. The network was larger than anyone had imagined. Investigators exhumed Evelyn's remains, not because they believed she was involved in Karen's murder, because they needed DNA. A genetic comparison could establish whether the unknown biological material found in the case belonged to Cross's family. The laboratory found no match, but the exhumation produced another discovery. A small metal object had been buried with Evelyn. A key, stamped 17. The same number as Morrison's storage unit. Morales stared at the photograph of the key. Someone had deliberately placed it there. But why? Investigators searched Evelyn's belongings. Her daughter provided an old jewelry box. Inside was a folded piece of paper. The handwriting was not Evelyn's. It was Karen's. Only one sentence. If Daniel comes back, don't let him near Elaine. Morales immediately understood. Karen had known Cross. She feared him, and she believed he might return. The investigators returned to Ohio. Daniel Crawford was brought in for questioning. He arrived without a lawyer. He sat calmly. Morales placed Karen's photograph on the table. Do you remember her? Crawford looked at it. Yes. Your real name is Daniel Cross. He said nothing. You worked for Midland. Nothing. You knew Samuel Vance. A slight nod. You knew David Morrison. Another nod. And Thomas Reed. Silence. Morales pushed the red book across the table. Crawford looked at it. For the first time, his expression changed. You found that? Yes. He leaned back. Then you already know. Know what? Karen wasn't supposed to die. The room became silent. Morales asked, Who killed her? Crawford looked down. David. Who ordered him? Crawford hesitated. Then he said, No one. That answer matched Reed's earlier statement. But Morales wasn't satisfied. Why did Morrison kill her? Crawford closed his eyes. Because he panicked. About what? The ledger. Which ledger? The black one. Morales leaned forward. Karen had the black ledger. No. Crawford opened his eyes. Karen had the red book. The detectives exchanged looks. Then where did the black ledger come from? Crawford smiled faintly. Vance. The entire story shifted again. Crawford explained that the black ledger contained the financial records. The red book contained something more dangerous. Names. Witnesses. People who had been threatened. People who had disappeared. Karen had been collecting evidence independently. She had discovered the financial operation. Then she discovered the surveillance network. She realized Morrison was following her. She realized Vance was moving money. And eventually, she discovered Cross, the man above them. But Cross insisted he had never ordered Karen's death. He claimed Vance had panicked. Morrison had been sent to retrieve the documents. Reed had been instructed to help. The confrontation went wrong. Karen fought back. Morrison struck her. She died. Cross said he learned about the killing afterward. Morales didn't believe him. Then why did you run? Cross looked at her. Because I knew what would happen next. What? Everyone would start blaming everyone else. He leaned closer. And they did. Morales asked, Where is the second account? Cross smiled. Closed. When? 1991. Who withdrew the money? He said nothing. Cross. Silence. Then, Karen. Morales stared at him. What? Karen withdrew it. That sounded impossible. Karen had been dead for years. Cross explained. The account had been structured so that a surviving beneficiary could access the fund. Karen had discovered the account. Before she disappeared, she had transferred part of the money, not to herself, to an unknown account. A safe account. A hidden account. The red book contained the location. Morales opened it. The final pages were filled with numbers. She had assumed they were coordinates. They weren't. They were banking references. A private account. Opened under a false name. And according to Cross, only Karen knew the password. Morales asked, Who received the money? Cross looked directly at her. Elaine. The revelation was devastating. Karen had protected her sister. The money was not stolen. It was evidence. Karen had moved it to Elaine so that the operation could eventually be exposed. Elaine had spent 37 years unaware of what she possessed, or so investigators thought. Morales contacted Elaine. She denied knowing anything. Then detectives searched her old records. A dormant bank account appeared. Opened in 1989. The account had never been touched. The balance was small, only a few $1,000s. But attached to it was a safe deposit box. Elaine had never opened it. The box contained a sealed envelope. Inside was a cassette, a photograph, and a handwritten letter, Karen's final letter. Elaine began crying when she saw it. The letter was addressed to her. It said Karen knew she was being followed. She knew Morrison was dangerous. She knew Vance was hiding money. But she feared Cross most. Not because he had threatened her. Because he had told her something. Cross had said, Some people disappear because they know too much. Karen believed he was warning her. But she also believed he was afraid. Afraid of someone above him. Someone whose name she could not yet prove. The cassette was played. Karen's voice filled the room. I found the second account. A pause. The money isn't Cross's. Another pause. Cross is protecting someone. Her voice became quieter. Someone inside the company. The tape crackled. Then she said a name. The recording ended. Morales rewound it. The name was clear. Samuel Vance. But that was already known. Or so they thought. Then another voice appeared at the very end. A male voice. Barely audible. One sentence. She knows about the commissioner. The recording stopped. Morales froze. The commissioner? Which commissioner? A search of 1989 police records revealed a county official who had been involved in the original investigation. A man who had personally supervised the early case. A man who had signed the order allowing certain evidence to be destroyed. His name was Richard Bell. And Bell had retired from law enforcement in 2001. He was still alive, still living in Michigan. And according to old company records, he had received payments from Midland Industrial Services. The case had just crossed another line. Someone inside law enforcement may have helped bury it. The missing reports, the incomplete evidence, the abandoned leads, the failure to pursue Morrison, the failure to investigate the financial records, the failure to follow the storage unit, the failure to question Vance's movements. None of it looked accidental anymore. Morales ordered a complete audit of the original case. They discovered 11 evidence transferred. 7 were poorly documented. 3 files had missing pages. 1 evidence bag had been marked destroyed. But the destruction order had no signature. The evidence was never actually destroyed. It had simply disappeared. Morales traced the evidence number. It led to an old off-site archive, a storage building scheduled for demolition. Investigators arrived before the demolition crew. Inside, they found a box. Karen's missing evidence. Photographs. Notes. A cassette. And 1 envelope. On the envelope was a single name. Richard Bell. Morales opened it. Inside was a photograph of Bell meeting Samuel Vance. The date was October 12th, still 1989. One day after Karen disappeared. They were standing beside a police vehicle. Between them was a cardboard evidence box. The same box number appeared in the missing evidence records. Morales stared at the image. For 37 years, investigators had believed the evidence had simply vanished. Now they knew someone had taken it. And the person standing beside the box was the man who had controlled the original investigation, Richard Bell. The photograph had been taken one day after Karen disappeared. And in the background, almost hidden behind the police vehicle, stood another man, David Morrison. Watching. Waiting. The cold case was no longer just about one killer. It was about a chain of people who had protected a secret. And at the center of that secret was a missing piece of evidence that could finally prove who gave the order. The investigators had found the name. They had found the money. They had found the DNA. They had found Karen. But they still needed the one thing that could turn decades of suspicion into a case that could survive a courtroom. A confession. And Richard Bell was still alive. Richard Bell answered the door at 6:18 in the morning. He was 84 years old. He walked slowly. One hand rested on a cane. But when he saw the detectives standing outside, something changed in his expression. He knew why they had come. Morales held up the photograph. Bell stared at it. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he whispered, "Where did you get that?" "From the evidence archive." Bell's face went pale. The detectives entered. The house smelled of old paper and coffee. Photographs covered one wall. Family photographs. Awards. Retirement ceremonies. Photographs from Bell's years in law enforcement. A respectable life. A decorated career. 37 years of memories. And somewhere inside those memories was Karen Whitmore. Morales placed the photograph on the table. Bell looked at it again. "You met Samuel Vance the day after Karen disappeared." "I don't remember." "You signed the evidence transfer." "I don't remember." "You met David Morrison." No. "We found your fingerprints on the box." Bell said nothing. Morales leaned forward. "Karen was murdered." "I know." "You knew in 1989. Bell's eyes moved toward the window. "I knew she was dead." The room went silent. It was the first admission. Not a confession, but close. Morales asked, "Who told you?" Bell swallowed. "Vance." "When?" "The morning after." "What did he say?" Bell closed his eyes. "He said there had been an accident." "What kind of accident?" "He wouldn't tell me." "And you believed him?" No. "Then why did you help him?" Bell's hands trembled. "I didn't help him. You destroyed evidence. I protected the department." Morales stared at him. Bell continued. "You don't understand what was happening." "Then explain it." He remained silent. Finally, he said, "People were afraid." "Of Vance?" "No. Of Cross? Bell shook his head. Of the people above them. Morales felt the room tighten. Who? Bell looked directly at her. The commissioner. She already knew the name. Richard Bell had worked directly under Commissioner Arthur Sloan. Sloan had been one of the most powerful law enforcement officials in the region. He had retired in 1996. He died in 2008. His name appeared nowhere in the original investigation, but Bell said Sloan knew about Karen. He knew everything. Morales asked, "Did Sloan order her murder?" Bell didn't answer. Instead, he reached into a drawer. He removed an old envelope. The paper was yellow. The seal had never been broken. Bell placed it on the table. "This is why I couldn't talk." Morales opened it. Inside was a photograph. Sloan, Vance, Morrison, and Daniel Cross. All four men were standing inside the Midland Industrial Services building. The date was October 7th, still 1989, 4 days before Karen disappeared. On the table between them was the black ledger. The photograph had been taken secretly. Whoever took it had been close enough to hear them. On the back was a sentence. "They know she has copies." Morales looked at Bell. "Who took this?" Bell shook his head. "I don't know. You kept it for 37 years. I couldn't destroy it." "Why?" "Because I knew someday someone would find the truth." Morales turned the photograph over again. There was something else written underneath. A second line. "If Karen disappears, look at Sloan." Bell finally admitted what he had done. He had removed several pieces of evidence from the case. He had redirected detectives away from Morrison. He had stopped a deeper financial investigation, and he had personally instructed officers not to search certain Midland property. "Why?" Bell's voice cracked. "Because Sloan told me to." "Did he threaten you?" "He didn't have to." Bell described the atmosphere inside the department. Officers who challenged Sloan suddenly lost assignments. Promotions disappeared. Complaints vanished. People learned quickly. You did not cross him. But Bell insisted he had never known that Karen would be killed. He claimed he believed Sloan wanted the financial investigation buried, not murder. Then what happened? Bell looked at the photograph. Vance lost control. That's what Reed said. Reed was there. Where? The warehouse. Bell described the night. Karen had been brought to the abandoned building. Morrison was there. Reed was there. Vance was there. Cross arrived later. Karen had confronted them. She demanded the ledger back. She said she had copies. She threatened to go to police. Then she said something that changed the situation. She told them Elaine had the red book. Morrison panicked. He grabbed Karen. She fought. There was an argument. Then a blow. Karen fell. Bell said Morrison believed she was dead. Vance ordered everyone to leave. But Bell said Cross did something unexpected. He checked Karen's pulse. She was still alive. Morales stared at him. What happened? Bell looked down. I don't know. You were there? No. Then how do you know? Bell hesitated. I heard it from Vance. Years later? No. That night. Morales leaned closer. Who called you? Bell's voice dropped. Vance. He called you after the killing? Yes. Why? He said they needed help. Bell admitted he arrived at the warehouse shortly after. Karen was still alive. Barely. She was unconscious. Morrison wanted to finish it. Bell said no. Vance argued. Cross watched. Then Bell made the decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He called an ambulance. But before help arrived, Vance stopped him. Why? Bell stared at the floor. Because Sloan called. Morales froze. How did Sloan know? I don't know. What did he say? He told me not to involve the hospital. Why? Bell's eyes filled with tears. He said Karen couldn't survive. Morales felt anger rising. What happened to her? Bell whispered. Morrison took her. Where? The canal. Morales already knew the answer. The place where Karen's remains had been found. Bell said he watched Morrison's vehicle leave. He did not follow. He went home. The next morning, Sloan summoned him. There were orders. No deeper investigation. No financial records. No search of Midland property. Morrison would be questioned. Then released. Vance would provide an alibi. Cross would disappear. And Bell would make sure the case stayed quiet. The original investigation was compromised before it had even begun. Morales asked, "Why didn't you speak?" Elle looked at her. "Because Sloan had people everywhere. You could have gone to another agency. I was afraid." "Afraid for yourself?" Elle nodded. "And my family." Silence filled the room. Elle was not asking for forgiveness. He knew what he had done. But he had one final piece of information. Sloan had kept records. Private records. He documented payments, names, meetings, threats, everything. Elle believed Sloan kept the records because he trusted nobody. "Where are they?" Elle gave Morales an address, an old hunting cabin, northern Michigan, a place Sloan had owned until his death. Police searched it. Inside a locked cabinet, they found 12 boxes, financial records, photographs, cassette tapes, letters, and a small black notebook. The notebook contained dates, names, payments. One entry was dated October 10th, still 1989, meeting with VK problem. Another, DM instructed. Another, B, will handle police. And another, no body. Morales stared at the page. The evidence was finally connecting. Sloan knew. Vance knew. Morrison acted. Bell covered the investigation. Cross helped conceal the operation. Reed assisted afterward. But the notebook revealed something even more disturbing. The final entry for October 11th read, "If she survives, eliminate witness." The witness was not Karen. It was Elaine. Karen had been the first target. Elaine was the second. That explained why someone had abducted Elaine decades later. The network was still protecting itself. Morales immediately ordered protection for Elaine. But there was one problem. Elaine had disappeared again. Her phone was off. Her car had been abandoned. And the last person known to have spoken to her was Daniel Cross. Cross was still missing. Investigators returned to his Ohio residence. The house was empty. But this time, they found a basement room that had been recently cleaned. The walls were covered with photographs. Karen, Elaine, Morales, Bell, Vance, Morrison, and several other investigators. Cross had been watching everyone. A map covered the floor. Red lines connected locations across Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. At the center was one location, a small town in Michigan, the same town where Karen had lived. Investigators searched the map. One address was circled repeatedly, Elaine's childhood home. But the house had been sold years earlier. The new owner had no connection to the case, except for one thing. The basement had never been renovated. Police entered. Behind a false wall, they found a metal box. Inside was the original red book cover. Empty. The pages were gone. Someone had taken them. But beneath the box was a cassette. Morales played it. Daniel Cross's voice filled the room. "I didn't kill Karen." A pause. "I didn't order her death." Another pause. "But I know who did." The recording continued. Arthur Sloan gave the order. Morales stared at the recorder. Then Cross said, "He told Morrison to make it look like a disappearance." The tape crackled. "He told Vance to erase the money." Then silence. "And he told Bell to erase the case." Morales rewound it. Cross had finally named the person who had been missing from the story. Arthur Sloan, the former commissioner, dead for 18 years. But the recording wasn't finished. Cross continued. Sloan wasn't the highest person. Morales stopped the tape. She looked at the detectives. Nobody spoke. Then she pressed play. Cross whispered. There was someone above him. A long pause. Someone whose name never appeared in any file. The tape ended. For 37 years, investigators had believed they were chasing a murderer. Now they understood they had been chasing an entire system. And the system had survived because every person who knew the truth had either disappeared, died, stayed silent, or been frightened into obedience. But Cross had left one final clue. A location, a date, and a name. The name belonged to someone still alive. Someone who had never been questioned. Someone who had never appeared in the case. And when investigators entered that name into the database, they discovered something chilling. The person was still living in Michigan, less than 20 miles from Karen's grave. And according to the records, he had visited the cemetery every October for 37 years. Not to remember Karen, but to make sure nobody had found what he had buried there.